This video will be the first in a series of videos where we look at different types of test doubles. In our previous Java video, we created a queue abstract data class, the implementation of which didn't involve any other classes. In our day-to-day work, it isn't common for us to create any code that doesn't rely on other classes. When we're writing unit tests for code that requires other classes, we want full control over the other classes we're using, and this is where test doubles become very useful. Hi, I'm Mark Bradley, and welcome to Testing All the Things, a screencast in which we use live coding to demonstrate different types of testing tools and techniques. In this video, we're going to look at two types of test doubles available to us. We're going to look at dummies and stubs. And then in later videos, we'll look at spies, mocks, and fakes. Let's look at the code. In the next couple of videos, we're going to implement a driving license number generator driven by tests. The functionality of our driving license number generator is that it should take an applicant. If the applicant is over 17 and does not already hold a driving license, then a driving license number should be generated for that applicant. The driving license number will be generated using the initials of our applicant, the date of birth of the applicant, and then some randomly generated numbers added to the end to ensure that all driving license numbers are unique. In today's video, we're going to start working on some of the functionality. We're going to work on ensuring applicants under the age of 17 do not receive a driving license number. Applicants that already hold a driving license do not get a second driving license. To do this, we're going to have to create a few different test doubles. We're going to need to create dummies of the dependencies that we're not going to start using in this piece of the code, that being the logger interface, which has a log function which takes a string, and the random number generator interface, which generates our random string of integers. So we need to create dummies of those. We will also need to create some stubs of our applicant interface to pass in, and these will need to return specific values so that we can control what should happen within our implementation. Let's start with our first test, and then we can go through the different types of test doubles we need to create. In our first test, we will ensure that the applicant must be over the age of 17. So we are going to test underage applicant cannot get a license number. So at this point, we need to produce an implementation of our applicant interface that will be under the age of 17. So we can put this in our test folder, because we're going to create a stub for this. So we'll create a new class, and we'll call it underage applicant. And it will implement the applicant interface. Okay, so we've got a red squiggly because we're not implementing the methods. All of them, thank you. For this test and this stub, we only need a guaranteed response on the is over 17 function, which we need to be false. We need the applicant to be underage. At this point, everything else in our class can just return a null. So we now have a stubbed version of the over 17 function, it returns a hard-coded value, and because of the naming of our class, we are very clear what functionality this stub provides to us. So if we can go applicant equals new underage applicant. So we now have a test double that is configured to be underage. We also need to construct our driving license number generator. This will take two dependencies. It will take a logger and a random number generator. So we need a test double of those, but at the moment we're not going to be using those test doubles. So we can create dummies. These dummies, all they do is just implement the interface. So if we create another new class, we'll call it dummy logger. That implements the logger. Okay, so at this point we've now done enough to create a dummy of rename it dummy logger. There we go. So we've now done enough to create a test double that we can use of our logger. At the moment we don't have any need to log. We won't have any need to log in our test, so this is enough. We'll also do the same for the random number generator. New class, dummy random numbers. That implements random number generator. There we go. And again, all we've done is created a class that's just enough to implement the interface. We ignore the count, we return null, it does nothing beyond what it needs to do. So we can now continue with the test. So now we can instantiate our logger equals new dummy logger, and we can instantiate our random numbers generator. New dummy. And now we can create our generator, our license generator now. So driving license number generator equals license. We'll call it license number generator equals new driving license number generator. We know that our driving license generator takes two dependencies, the generator and the logger, so we'll pass those in. And the logger. We've got a red squiggly over here. Now, ID is complaining, so let's see if we can solve that. Create the constructor. We'll call it random number generator in here, logger and logger's fine. Okay, so we've got now enough test double that we can pass in and our constructor can be used. Okay, while we're here, what we'll do is we'll create fields. That one. Create a field for that one. So here we go. In these first few tests, we're not going to use these at all. And in fact, we won't use these dependencies at all throughout this video, but we are going to interact with our applicant inside our code. So let's carry on writing our test now that our test is in a compiling state. License number generator dot generate. We want to take the applicant. Okay, so the function doesn't yet exist. So we'll generate the function. So it doesn't return void, we know it's going to return a string. Okay. Okay. So our test is compilable, our code has got to that point. So now we need to write our expectations of what's going to happen in this test. Now, we've said that if the applicant is underage, they shouldn't receive a driving license number. So we could just, if they're underage, return null and check for that nullness. Or what would be even better is if they're underage, that's an exception, and we should throw an exception and expect an exception. So let's check for that exception. We want to assert throws. So we need an exception to be thrown. Now we want specific exceptions to be thrown for these cases. So we need to go and create an exception class. New Java class under the exception. Extend exception. Move that over into our implementation side of the code. So we expect an underage dot class like so, and then bracket type there, so one, and then braces. So we've now set up our test. We've got our underage applicant. In fact, let's rename that so it's really clear. We can say Shift F6. It is a stub underage applicant. So we've got a stub test double here, which just returns a hard-coded value every time. No cleverness about it. It just is hard-coded in the class. And we've got a dummy logger and a dummy random number generator, which just do enough to implement the interface. They don't even return anything, they just return nulls if they need to return something. We've instantiated our code under test, the driving license number generator, and we've provided it with those two dummies. We only need dummies at this point because at the moment we have no need for them to do anything in the code. And then we pass in our stub applicant here, and when the generate function is called, we expect an exception to be thrown. So if we run this test, so our test is currently failing. It looks like we were expecting something to be thrown, but nothing was thrown. So let's go into our code base. And we need to make the smallest change to our generate function to make the test pass. And the easiest way we can do this is we can just throw the exception. Because at the moment, our tests only require us to, all that we know from our test, in fact, is that an exception should be thrown. So that's the only thing we should be implementing in our generate function. So we'll throw new underage exception. What we're going to say is too young. fact, let's not even. Okay. So we've thrown the exception. We now need to just add the throws to our method, and let's rerun our test. And our test is passing. So we've used now the stub to make that test pass. We're going to create one more stub in this video, and that will be to test the occasion when the applicant already holds a license. So let's create a new test. Holder cannot get a second license. We now need another applicant stub that returns different information. So if we create a new class here, so we will call it license stub license holder applicant. That's going to implement applicant. To implement all the methods. Okay. So to be a license holder, you must be over 17. So this needs to return true. Like so. But you must also already hold a license. And now in this one, this can't return null, it must return true. And now we've created our stub license holder. We can start using that in our next test. So applicant equals applicant equals new stub license holder applicant. We need to create our dummies again. We need to instantiate our code under test again. So currently everything is compilable and the code is okay. So we now need to write our expectation. So like we did with the underage applicant, we're going to accept an exception when the duplicate applicant makes their request. So we will do assert throws. We want a new exception class for this. We'll do new Java class. We shall call it duplicate applicant exception. And that extends exception. Put that over on this side again. And now we can expect it. Class. Okay. Oh, typo there. So we accept the duplicate applicant exception to be thrown when we call license number generator generate with our duplicate license holder. Okay, we'll run all our tests again. It's failing on our new test. We expected an exception to be thrown, which was duplicate applicant exception, but it was an underage applicant exception. So we now are in a point where we need to write a little bit more code. We can do if applicant dot holds driving license return, oh no, sorry, don't want to return, throw new underage, no, got that one, duplicate. Why is it not finding it? Did I put it in the right place? That could be the problem. Oh, I didn't. So let's drag it up, move it there. Factor. Again. There we go, found it this one. Let's throw that. Complaining that. There we go. Okay, we'll run our test. Null pointer exception. Okay, so we've slightly broken one of our stubs. This needs to return false. Because someone underage can't hold a driving license, so let's try that. It's a bit better. There we are. So our driving license number generator application now has two tests to it. It ensures that an underage applicant cannot generate a license and a license holder cannot generate a second license. And to do this, we've created a few different types of test double. We've created a dummy here. So we've got a dummy logger. We also have a dummy random number generator. And all a dummy test double does is enough to implement the interface, enough to get it to be able to be passed in where the interface is required. So for this logger interface here, we've got a single function called log, which takes a string and returns void. So we've just done enough. In fact, we can make this even smaller, like that, to show that it's doing absolutely nothing. If we save that one. And then we've also dummied the random number generator interface. Okay. And again, we've done just enough for the interface to be able to be passed over the boundary. So the function the single function is implemented and it just returns a null where it should be returning a string. Okay, so it's just doing enough to be able to be passed over the boundary. And then for each of our tests, we're using also a stub. So a stub moves us on from a dummy. It has a little bit more functionality to it, and a stub returns a hard-coded value. So at the moment, we've got some stubs here for our applicant. We've got a stub that says they're underage. So it always will return false for is over 17. They will never be old enough to obtain a license. So we just have a hard-coded false here and a hard-coded false here because they can't already own a license. And then we also have the license holder applicant, and they are over 17 because you have to be over 17 to hold a license, and they hold a driving license, so they can't have another one. So we've got our two stubs here. They're just returning hard-coded values, and we've named them so that it's clear how we can use them. We've got our license holder applicant and we've got our underage applicant. So our test code is really nice and clean at this point. And our implementation is very simple. It just either checks that they hold a license and throws an exception, certain exception, or it just throws an exception because they're underage. We will add more functionality to this class and more tests to our test class as we explore the different types of test dummies. I hope you found this video on the first types of test doubles useful. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching this episode of Testing All the Things. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please rate and review the video and subscribe to the channel. If you did not and you have any feedback, please leave a comment in the comment section of the video or contact me on Twitter @Bradle.